Hey, this is Carl with Gallantfew. You are in for a treat. You're about to see the worldwide premiere of Simon Sinek at VetXpo 2019. Last October, Gallantfew hosted an event at Cinnamon Creek Ranch in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we brought in veterans to form a business panel. We brought in veteran thought leaders. We brought in some folks that are part of the veteran community to talk about their experiences with veterans and how veterans can move forward to lives of purpose and hope. And to kick the event off Friday night, Simon Sinek joined us. Simon is a fan of Gallantfew. He's our number one, probably most famous volunteer. And he came in because he wanted to get connected with our community and he wanted to have an opportunity to tell his story. This upcoming week, I'm going to give this copy of Simon Sinek's new book, The Infinite Game, to someone who donates to Run Ranger Run. I'm going to randomly pick somebody after this upcoming week. Week number 2 of Run Ranger Run is complete. I'm going to randomly pick someone to send this book to. So if you haven't donated yet, make a donation, get in the pot to perhaps get your name selected to win this book. In this video, Simon talks about his deep connection to the military and how he learned the true value and meaning of his freedom. So enjoy. Be brave, be bold, be gallant.
So without further ado, I will present to you Mr. Carl Monger, Mr. Simon Sinek. Give him a round of applause.
So the military were early adopters of my work. I had my own little business. I did marketing consulting, and I came up with this little idea called the Golden Circle and the concept of why. And I first articulated it publicly in January of 2006. And literally, I had no TED Talk, no books, no nothing. In May of that year, I was standing in the Pentagon giving a presentation about this concept of why. So the military were some of the first people to hear this and thought it had value. And so my entire career, my entire journey has been with the military. I've fallen in love with the folks I've met. I've cried more tears with folks in uniform. I've never cried with somebody in a suit. I've hugged more people in uniform. You rarely hug people in suits. And I've sat around dinner tables where we've told stories and cried, and I've never done that in the civilian world. And I'm a sucker for people who are willing to serve, who are willing to sacrifice their interests for the good of others. So it's been a wonderful journey, and proud to continue that journey for as long as I can.
Were you surprised at how quickly you were welcomed into that family? When you say you sat around and cried with them, that's most civilians will avoid a veteran or talk about it because they feel like they're not worthy because they didn't serve, which is not. I mean, we don't think that way, right? So, what was it? How did you get connected into the community so quickly, you think?
I care about doing things that matter. And I remember that, in the early days, I would have a conversation with somebody at Pentagon, and they'd say, we'd want to bring you in to help us out, but here's the process. We have to triple bid it, and have to go through this process, and we can single source you, but it's going to, and I would look at me and I'd say, I'd rather make progress than profit. So why don't we just do this? Don't worry about it. Just let's just do this. And the funniest thing is, if you do anything pro bono in the private sector, they will take until you put your hands up and be like, no more. In the military, I would do something pro bono, and then I would never hear from them again. And the reason is because they never wanted a call for fear of appearing like they were taking advantage. Oh. So I had to explain to them, when you don't call, you are denying me the opportunity to serve my country. And that put a whole new perspective on it for them. So now they call all the time, which is great, which I will add is great. Was I surprised that I was embraced so quickly? I think so, yes, I was. And I think they saw something different in me than they were used to from the private sector as well. They gave me unbelievable access. They would always take my calls. They would always take my meetings. They would invite me in. And I think because I had nothing to sell and I wanted nothing from anybody. I never asked for a favor. I didn't want anything from anybody. Like anyone who volunteers, I wanted to serve. And I think they saw that in me, and as a result, let me in. And I've had the honor of being let into places that civilians don't get let into, and it's only furthered my love of those people.
When we were upstairs, excuse me, when we were upstairs, we were talking about how one story is impactful, but 100,000 stories all rolled into one is not.
The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of a million is a statistic.
This is why he's a best-selling author, and I'm trying to give my books away, because he remembers these. One of the things that relates in our world is there's a lot of focus on 20 veterans a day or 22 veterans a day that take their own lives. Yeah. And that number, I think, becomes something that people's eyes glaze over when they hear it. Yeah. And if you take 22 or 20 by 365 by 18 years of war, you're 100,000 people. Yeah. And that's, the eyes glaze over. They don't talk about it on the news. It doesn't make any kind of big story. And so I prefer to talk about how do we prevent the next suicide? How do we stop the next veteran suicide? Yeah. And that's something that we all struggle with. Tomorrow, Boone Cutler is going to talk about the Spartan Pledge and the promise that one veteran makes to another that says, I won't take my life by my own hand until I call my battle buddy first. Right? It's a promise that you are going to reach out. And that allows you to be reminded that you're loved and that you're wanted and that you have value. Because when the world closes in around you, you don't see the beauty that's on the other side of whatever issue that is right in front of you. And it goes to purpose, it goes to hope. And what are your thoughts about that? How do you stop the next one?
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do is humanize this. As you said, the problem with numbers is they're not human. They're numbers. And so when you say, 22 vets take their life, I could say 32. It's the same number. Mm-hmm. I could say 42. It's the same number. It's a lot, And the problem is these numbers become abstract, and nobody has a relationship with a number. Nobody has an emotional reaction to a number. And so I think the most important thing we can do is tell the stories of individuals, put faces and names and lives with these numbers, and make people representative of the population. So even to say, how do we prevent the next? It's still an abstract concept, mm-hmm. though I think it's in the right direction. I had the opportunity to work out with the 101st. And we went out in the tarmac one morning, and I was like, doing push-ups on
Screaming Eagle veterans out there?
Doing push-ups on the gravel, and I was like, great workout, guys. And that was the warm-up. But then we went and did a heroes workout, which I know many of you know what that is. And before we got started, they pulled out a piece of paper, and they told the story and they actually told the story of an airman amongst soldiers. And they told the story of a fallen comrade. And they said what his name was, and where he died, and how he died, and what he was like, and what his wife's name was, and what his kids' names were. And we all stood there and felt it. And then we worked out for him. And when we were dragging, you picked it up because it was for him. It wasn't for an abstract fallen comrade. It was for this. We gave him a name. It was a real person. And I think the most important thing you can do is give these faceless, nameless stories depth and humanity. So I strongly encourage, the names of unfortunately too many, but to tell the stories of the ones that hurt you every time you tell them, that you struggle to get through that story, and give them a name and give them a life, and tell that story, and then you say, and that's why we have to prevent the next one. And I think those stories become a lot more powerful.
One thing that I neglected to do when we started, I asked veterans to stand up. Gold Star families. Do we have Gold Star families here? If so, if you're willing to, would you stand up? I know there's at least one. It is very special that she is here today, and because yesterday was the 10-year anniversary. And I know it was tough for her to come out and join us, but I'm so glad that you're here. And tomorrow, last year she was a speaker with us, and tomorrow she's not a speaker, but she's a resource. So anybody that wants to come tomorrow when we're out here, we'll be back in this place all day tomorrow. Annette's going to be here, so please come tomorrow, and thank you. I know Annette's coming tomorrow, but anybody else, please. Bryce, do we have microphones out there so that I'm not the only one that's asking questions? Does anybody would somebody like to ask a question of Simon? Because we'll open this up. And if you do, raise your hand, because with the microphones that are going around, we'll get a microphone over to you so you can ask a question. And while you guys are panicking that I just asked you to ask a question, so Zach went to your website, and it was funny because I think actually the first time you called, you left him a voicemail, and he comes in and he's like this, I don't know who it was that called, some guy named Simon. I don't know any Simons. And so it took him a while to kind of put two and two together. But when he did, the light bulb went off. He was like, what do I do now? What was it about his story that really stood out to you?
Well, it was my team, where the story really resonated with the team. And we have somebody who reads all the emails that come in, and they give me a packet to read of the ones that they know will inspire me. And on this day, I got one email, and it was Zach's. And I read it, and it brought me to tears. And thank goodness he put his phone number on the bottom, because I got to call him and thank him and talk to him for a bit. And it was just dumb luck that he was in Dallas, and a few weeks later I was going to be in Dallas.
There's no luck.
Yep. Well, it was a blessing. It's a funny turn of events, and here we are today. It's an honor to be here. And so, yeah, it's funny how life works.
Question? We have a question?
We started to talk earlier about the book Leaders Eat Last. I wonder if you could tell us more about what inspired that book and the big lessons you want everybody to know from it.
Sure. That book came from a story that's not in the book. So I was doing a lot of work for AMC at the time, for Air Mobility Command, and the 4-star who was in charge at the time came up to me and said, I know you do a lot of work with us and you've really gotten to know us, but it would mean a lot to us if you got to see us actually perform our mission. Would you be willing to go to Iraq or Afghanistan? So I said yes. And they sent me to Afghanistan. They sent two officers to just look after me, to accompany me. And I had no responsibility. I was just going to see these wonderful men and women perform their duty. And we flew from Dover on a C-5 to Ramstein. And then we changed planes, and we got on a KC-135, and we flew to Bagram. And I was there on August 16th, 2011, if you know what happened on that date. So we landed in Bagram at about 10 p.m. at night, and about 10 minutes after we were on the ground, the base came under rocket attack. And we had 3 rockets hit 100 yards off our nose. All the sirens were going off, everything. And I was with a group of people. We're still in the plane. The door is open on the side, and no one put on their vests. Because what are you going to do? You're on a plane filled with gas. Like, what's the point? And I was really relaxed because everybody else is really relaxed. And many of you who've been in a war zone, you have all the feelings you would expect to have, but you don't necessarily have them at the right time. My panic came later. And so we were on the plane. Finally, the sirens went off, and we were told we could leave the plane and go to our quarters. And the panic still hadn't hit. The next day, I had an incredible day. We got up early in the morning. We took a C-17 out and did an airdrop mission down to 2,000 feet and supplied an Army fob. It was amazing. And then we came back, and the goal was to leave. And because I'm only supposed to be there for as long as I need to be there. And we fly at the discretion of the pilots, if there's room for us. We found an outbound KC-135 evac mission. And we asked the pilots, can we jump on your plane? He said yes. And then we waited and 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 waited. I mean, hours went by. We were just sitting under the plane in the shade. And then finally we got the all clear. We got on. We're all strapped in. Literally 5 minutes before takeoff, we were told we needed to get off the plane because they needed the space for more stretchers. If there's ever a good reason to get thrown off a plane, this was it. So now we had to try and find another flight. And this was when we found out that there were no more flights leaving, and there probably won't be any more flights leaving for another 4 days. This was a Saturday. I wouldn't even get a chance to leave until Tuesday, and I never told my parents or my family where I was going because I didn't want them to worry about me. I told them I was going away with the military. True. I told them I was going to be on a lot of planes. I'd be out of touch. True. I told them I was going to Germany. True. I just didn't tell them I was going on to Afghanistan. So now the panic hits. All of a sudden, I can feel every fiber of my being sink. I remember caring about one thing and one thing only: my safety, my security, my happiness, and I didn't care who had to twist themselves into knots to get me what I wanted. And I could feel myself becoming a person that I detest. Like, I actually remember there was a PA officer who said, I can get you to Kyrgyzstan, but you don't have the right visas. And I literally put my finger up and said, you get me on that plane. Like, I don't talk to people that way. And I could see myself becoming this person. We didn't know what to do, you know. So we went back to our quarters, and we were all exhausted because we only got like 2 or 3 hours of sleep the night before. One of the guys said, I'm going to see if I can get us on another flight. So he left. The other guy, I laid in the bed with my eyes closed. He thought I was sleeping, so he just left and went to the gym. And I was left lying there in the dark by myself, and my mind was racing. And I remember the panic that I had. I was convinced there was going to be another rocket attack, and I was convinced it was going to land on me. And I was convinced that my parents were going to find out that I was in Afghanistan when somebody would knock on the door. I was convinced. And I'm in the purpose business, and I realized that I was panicking because I had no purpose. I had no reason to be there. So I started racing through them and trying to invent a purpose for myself, that you're here to tell their story, and it would make me feel okay for like 3 minutes, and then I would panic again. And I realized what I was experiencing was an exaggerated sense of what it means to feel like, to live an unfulfilling life. That what I was feeling was an exaggerated experience that people have in their careers, where when you have no sense of purpose, you become paranoid, you become alone, it's just an awful state. And I gave up. I lay in that bed and I gave up. I couldn't come up with any solution, and so I quit. And I made the decision that if I was going to get stuck here, I was just going to make myself valuable. And I would volunteer. I would speak if they wanted me to speak to whomever they wanted me to speak to. I would sweep floors. I would carry boxes. I met some amazing people. All I wanted to do was the most menial labor that I could support them. It was weird because it was like a movie. As soon as I had found this amazing calm from this decision to serve those who serve others, the door swung open, and it was Major Throckmorton. He says, I got us on another flight. There's been a flight that's been redirected. We can get on it, but we have to leave now. If we don't leave now, we're going to miss the flight. We got to go. Where's Matt? I'm like, he's at the gym. So we run to the gym. We get Matt off his treadmill. No time to shower. Puts his uniform back on, and we race out to our C-17. We can see the C-17 out on the flight line. And as soon as we get to the flight line, the security cordon comes down, and they won't let us approach the plane because somewhere on base, they're having a fallen soldier ceremony. And as you know, out of respect, when there's a fallen soldier ceremony, everything stops. And so we just waited. And we sat on the curb, and I told the guys what I just went through, this crazy emotional roller coaster, and I cried like a baby. And as you know, there's nothing wrong with crying in the military, right? And we finally got on the C-17. We would be the only 3 passengers aboard this aircraft. And the reason it was redirected is because we would be carrying home the soldier that they just had the fallen soldier ceremony. The Army marched the flag draped casket onto the plane, laid it down in the middle, did a slow 8-count salute, marched off the plane. The Air Force got to work and strapped the precious cargo down. I could see the soldiers hugging each other and crying as they walked out of sight. And we prepared to leave. It would be a 9.5-hour overnight flight back to Ramstein. On every other flight, we talked, we joked. I hung out in the cockpit. On every other flight, it was camaraderie. On this flight, barely spoke a word to anybody in the whole flight. I didn't visit the cockpit once. And as soon as we got into the air, everybody staked out a piece of real estate in the back of that C-17 to get some sleep. And the piece of real estate that was left for me was right next to the casket. And it's the greatest honor of my life that I just learned what service really means, which is to serve those who serve others. And what an honor it was for me to bring him home. And we got to Ramstein, and our final flight home was another C-17, and it was an AE mission. So it was about 30 some odd, predominantly soldiers and Marines, that we were bringing home on stretchers back home. And there was a Marine right at the back of the plane in CCAT, and there was a team of docs that were assigned just to him. His buddy had stepped on an IED and was killed, and he took the shrapnel. He had 2 broken legs, broken arm, shrapnel in the chest, punctured eyeball, and he was in an artificial coma. And the doc who was in charge of looking after him was a reservist from Austin, actually, who works in an ER. He works in an emergency room at a hospital in Austin. And I asked him a question I would never have asked had I not had the experience that I just had less than 24 hours before. I said, "You're a good guy. You save lives for a living. You work in an ER." I said, "Do you have a different feeling on these missions than you do back at home when you do your civilian work?" He looked at me, he said, "There's no comparison." He said, 90 to 95% of the people who come through the ER are either drunks or idiots. He says, "There's not a single drunk or idiot here." He says, "I cannot put into words the amount of fulfillment that I have." When we landed at Andrews on a Sunday. So the base was closed. I mean, there was no one there. It was a minimal staff that was only there to receive the aircraft. And the amazing thing is we were the last aircraft to come in because there were major storms. And we landed, and me and my 2 escorts, we walked away from the aircraft to try and find a ride home because we didn't know where we were going. They told us we're going to Andrews. And there was the biggest rainbow I ever saw in my entire life over that base. So it became like I learned what trust means from that trip. It changed me. And I learned what service really means. It's not service to a cause. It's serving those who serve others. That's the true definition of service. And I wanted to understand this thing called trust so desperately. And that's why I wrote Leaders Eat Last. It was born out of that experience.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah. I have a follow-up to that, but first I want to see, do you have another question in the back? Is there somebody that's waiting? So in your new book, The Infinite Game, you talk about the just cause. And in terms of corporate responsibility to the community, to their employees, and even factoring in shareholders in there. There's a fascinating discussion that you have about that and the way that the attitude in business leadership shifted in the 80s to where it is now. There's a lot of things that are applicable in terms of a just cause and having a purpose and understanding why you're here. And we were talking at dinner about that veteran suicide rate, but 7 out of 10 of those veterans are over the age of 50. And it takes a long time for them to go down a path where they lose purpose and lose hope and the just cause, right? Because everything that they did, their just cause was when they were 19, 20 years old, and now they're 45 or 50 or 60, and it just doesn't compare. Where do you start? How do you try to recapture a sense of a just cause in your personal life?
So the whole idea of a just cause is it's about the future. It's about contributing to a future state that does not exist. Our founding fathers 240 some odd years ago offers us a vision of the future that definitely did not exist, where all men were created equal, endowed with these unalienable rights. And they set it upon future generations to attempt to move the needle. And sometimes we move a little quicker, and sometimes we move a little slower, and sometimes we take a step back. Mm-hmm. But what it means to be an American is sort of a commitment to help move the needle forward a little bit. And I think that the choice to live one's life looking in the rearview mirror versus the choice to live one's life looking out the front window is just that. It's a choice. It's a mindset. And to glorify the past misses what's ahead. And to keep comparing, I read a great quote the other day. It said, the grass is not greener over there. It's fake, And I think we do that. I can tell you how I have romanticized all my ex-girlfriends that they were perfect for me when I'm lonely, And I think there's a danger in romanticizing the past. The past was great when we were living it, and the opportunity is to live for now and live for what's ahead. And I just think it's a choice to look into the where we can go rather than trying to relive what happened. Because it happened. And it was great when it was then, and we can celebrate it and say, wasn't it great? And now how exciting it is to try and do something in the future. And I'm a great believer in practicing and learning how to set one's mindset. Because so much of this is simply perspective. Mm-hmm. It's a choice to see the world one way or a choice to see the world the other way. And I understand that sometimes it's more difficult than others, which is why we need the help of others. It's amazing how much easier it is to see positive in the world when somebody says, I love you. When somebody says, I got your back. When somebody says, if this is going to go to shit, I'll still be here for you, And somebody says, I love you despite yourself, And when you just have the confidence that one person is there for you, it's much easier to see good in the world, It's so much easier.
We have a question? Anybody?
So I'm going to ask a question for you. Okay. I would like to ask you about your concept of why. In the idea of coming back and having your identity created in something that was incredible, in service of your country, starting at a very young age, your identity is being formed in those younger years. Brain is developing all the way to age 26, all of that. And after 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, 30 years, you come out and thank you for your service and now go pay bills and have a wife and or husband and all of that. And we all, a civilian or otherwise, we're always in states of transition. And I'd like you to, several of us quoted you, as I said to you upstairs, parts of your work. And I was intrigued by the why, the identity piece of it. Yeah. And how do you speak to the part about going backwards in time, trying to figure out who you are outside of the military. In the military, you have to give up your identity to become in the service of one. But to be a civilian, you have to be an individual and figure out who you are, what your passions are. Yep. And so there are a lot of people that I work with as a psychotherapist who get stuck when I don't know who I am. What do I want to be when I grow up? Or I'm not happy with what I'm doing now. It just seems not so fabulous, like you said. So talk to that, please.
So I think there's a paradox about being human, and you touched upon it. You said you're an individual when you go into the service, you become one, and then you leave and you're an individual again. And there's a paradox to being human, which is, and I'm so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food and safety are number one, and then number three is relationships. And the top you have contribution to something bigger and all of that stuff, enlightenment. And I think Maslow is wrong. And it's because of this paradox, which is as human beings, every moment of every day, we are individuals and members of groups every single day. So it's not that we're individuals and then we become one. It's that we're individuals and a member of a group, and then we become a member of a group and we're still individuals. And every single day we're forced to make decisions. Do I do what's right for me first, or do I do what's right for the group first? And there's an entire school of thought that says you have to look after yourself first, because if you're not healthy, you can't serve the group. And there's an entire school of thought that says, no, you have to serve the group first, because if you take care of them, they'll take care of you in a time of need. And we're both right and we're both wrong. This is the paradox and the problem with being human. Maslow's mistake was that he was only half right. He only considered us as individuals. That's why he said food and shelter come first. I don't know anybody who's ever committed suicide because they were hungry. We commit suicide because we're lonely, which means that seems to be more basic than even eating when we are members of groups. And so I think it's a complete fallacy to say that we give up our individualism when we join the military, and a complete fallacy when we say we lose our opportunity to be a member of a group when we become civilians. But rather, we have to remember that we are individuals and members of groups, and we have to serve both. And it's difficult because one must be sacrificed sometimes in service to the other, and it's about finding that right balance. And the youngest person I've ever been able to do a why discovery with was 16. I firmly believe that your why is fully formed by the time you're in your mid to late teens, and the rest of your life is an opportunity to live your why. And some people, it's not that their why is formed when they join the service, but they discover it when they join the service. And some won't discover it until many years after. But I think to learn one's why as soon as possible helps us direct and understand that the military was one of the places I got to give of myself. I got to offer the value that I'm on this planet Earth to contribute in this arena, and I will do it here and I will do it there as life goes on. There's one thing that every vet misses from the military. One thing. Officer, enlisted, every MOS, whether they're successful or whether they're struggling, everyone misses the camaraderie. And it's 100% true. You won't get that in the civilian world. You just won't. And to find it in organizations like this, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means you have to go looking for it. It's not given to you like it's just given to you when you put on your uniform. But I think the opportunity to learn your why dramatically helps us focus that our value is defined by who we are, not what we do. Your value is not defined by your MOS. Your value is not defined by the unit in which you served. Your value is defined by who you are as a human being. And you got to offer that to your MOS. You got to bring that to life in your MOS. You got to offer that to your unit. But you are yourself. And everybody knows that everybody in a unit has something different to offer of themselves. You're the problem solver. You're the clown. You're the leader. You're the one who's the silent one who's always there to help. Like, everybody has their thing to offer. And that's what a why is. It's our unique value to the world that others perceive in us and need in us. And the quicker we can put words to it, the more we can find other places to deliver that.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you again for coming over here and doing what you do, supporting us and everything. Just wanted to and I may have missed this earlier, so I apologize if I did, but what is how did your affinity to the military start? Like, did you have family or yourself in the military, or how'd that start?
My grandfather was in World War II, but everybody's grandfather was in World War II. I mean, you've hung out with each other. It's hard not to fall in love. I don't say like something happened that gave me an affinity. I got lucky enough that I got to meet people. You know, we have 1% of America's population that serve in the military. Most people just don't know somebody. You know, if you come from a part of the country, you might have a higher likelihood of knowing somebody. Do you know that 12% of the Marine Corps is from Texas? 12%! You know, I happened to grow up in suburban New Jersey. I mean, like, nobody I went to high school with went into the military. And it's just so I didn't get to meet anybody. And so the fact that I had the opportunity later in life to spend time with folks like you, I mean, how can you not fall in love? I mean, you know, I don't think it was an opportunity. I think it was just got lucky. And I think this is why I love to tell your stories in my book, because other people will fall in love with you too, you know? I don't think it's any more complicated than that, you know? It's like meeting the one.
Simon, our constant theme, we have several constant themes, but one is staying on asthma. And we believe that when you leave the military, the azimuth that you're given is, sometimes it's just not realistic. Sometimes it's awesome, but a lot of times it's not very realistic. And as you leave that service location around the world and you come home to Texas or California or New York or wherever you choose to call home, you start running into the things that take you off azimuth when you're doing nightland navigation, you're stumbling through a forest at night, it's walking through a spider web, and now you're doing the spider dance trying to figure out where the thing is, or you've fallen down a ditch or into a tree, and all those things take you off azimuth. And so we try very hard to help veterans determine what their azimuth is, where they are on that azimuth now, and then how can we get them back on azimuth. So because of that, we have something that we'd like you to take with you that will help you stay on azimuth. Okay, so if I can do this without falling off the stage. So this is a little box that says Simon Sinek Gallantfew VetXpo 2019, and it says be gallant on there. If you're truly from Texas, you say be gallant. So that's Kansas pronunciation is gallant. But inside here, we have a compass that I don't know if you could actually navigate with this, but this is one of the most beautiful compasses that I have ever seen. And you have to hold it because it's amazing to
This is
hold.
incredible.
So hopefully that will help you remember to stay on azimuth. It'll certainly help you remember us here. And whatever we can do, the collective group, myself personally, to help you as you go forward with your purpose of helping more veterans, we're in.
Thank you.
So let me know how we can help.
Thank you. This means a lot.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. That's amazing. Thank you very much. It means a lot.
This is amazing. Beautiful.